Right, hello, welcome to another edition, another module of the International Neuropalliative Care Society. I'm Benzi Kluger, the president. I am wearing my Davis Phinney Foundation shirt today, and I have been honored to speak at a number of events with Davis and Connie Phinney, who run the Davis Phinney Foundation. Davis is, I think, America's most award-winning cyclist, who then had a career as a announcer, but is now, at least in my mind, most known for his work in advocacy for Parkinson's. And Connie is also an Olympic medal winning athlete in 2 different sports, in bicycling and in speed skating, and has also been a key part of this foundation. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Benzi.
And I'd like to start, for people who don't know you, maybe Connie and Davis, if you want to share a little bit about your life before this diagnosis, and then we can talk about how that life has informed your approach to living with this diagnosis, as well as your approach to helping others who are living with this diagnosis.
All right. Well, my life before diagnosis was extremely busy. I was doing about 5 different jobs and traveling incessantly, and was fairly much exhausted all the time. But ultimately, I was led to the diagnosis by this a small tremor that I had in my hand, which is fairly common.
Well, let's say you were, so let's back it up even further. So yes, Davis was a world-class athlete. I stopped racing well before him. Davis raced in the Tour de France several times. He won stages in the Tour de France. So this is somebody who knew how to perform at a really high level. And when he retired from racing, we had just had our children. We had a son and a daughter, and he was trying to figure out what's next. So he took a whole bunch of jobs, at once, and was just traveling all over the globe, as one would do, and, really trying to figure out where he fit in. And honestly, it was, to me, the concerning symptom was his excessive fatigue, because he had been operating at such a high level, but then this fatigue that he had was so crazy, and I couldn't get my mind around it, actually. Even when he would rest, it didn't seem like he'd get better. And then came the tremor. So, we've been married now for almost 40 years. And he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's for half of that time. Probably had it for, as you know, like many, many years beforehand. But, we were busy. We had 2 little kids, and, and I think I would describe both of us as very self-centered, as far as our health goes. We're very aware, having been elite athletes. And so, just seeing Davis in this state was like, what is going on here? So that was a little bit of life before, and life after was a pretty marked, deep line in the sand, like, whoa.
Right, because fairly quickly upon diagnosis, I realized that all of my excessive travel was not going to help me live well with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
And so we put a hold on that, and we moved to another country just to get a different perspective and sort of check out.
Well, we had the luxury of moving to Italy. We were doing a bike camp business, a bike touring business that took us to Italy quite a bit with our clients, and just decided, what, we need to just reinvent ourselves. And I think that's a big part of diagnosis, is reinventing yourself and navigating this new terrain of, medicines and protocols. And Davis was diagnosed in 2000, and the internet, of course, was very active then, but it wasn't as accessible as it is now, where I think, if I could give people advice, it would be not to spend too much time looking at the what if factor of Parkinson's, but at the what you can do aspect, which is really what we did, I think, because the first doctor we saw after diagnosis, gave us the biggest lie, which was, I can help you feel better than you've ever felt. And, for two Olympic athletes, this was quite a statement.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that turned out to be a big lie. And so or a false promise, let's put it that way. So I think the important thing for us was getting a grip on our lives and on what this meant for our lives, and then how to deal with it in the best way possible.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting thing. It seems like there's kind of two sides of this, but your prior lives as elite athletes, I would imagine that both made it possibly in some ways easier, but in other ways harder to have a diagnosis like this. And I don't know if you want to speak to what strengths you might have drawn from or what adjustments might have been harder because of that background.
Well, we do have a can-do attitude, which comes with the, ability to, climb mountains and race down mountains and sprint in tight fields of lycra-clad cyclists, And so I think that can help and hurt depending on, your point of view. It certainly was shocking for our friend group to hear the disease Parkinson's attached to Davis. Sure. That was an impossible link. And so I think that was hard.
Well, yeah. And also, I mean, I at that time in my life, I considered it my athletic fall from grace was because all of a sudden I had these binders on my body that I hadn't had before. And so everything was made more difficult. And that included exercise, which exercise had been such a mainstay for us. But over time, I evolved my levels of exercise and I took my ego out of it. And I stopped thinking that I had to be representing my past self. And I was just representative of what I was now.
What you are now.
What I am now, yes.
Yeah, and I think, Benzi, we were out for a ride yesterday on our bikes. It was a beautiful day here in Colorado. And we saw a bunch of our friends riding up a canyon while we were riding down. And I said, we must be just sort of like this caricature of the couple who does everything together. We're still riding together 40 years later on e-bikes, mind you. We're having a lot more fun. But we definitely, it's just like to try to keep that normalcy. And that's sort of been our constant line through all of this, is being able to still do things together. And of course, there's been very challenging, periods of time for us, but I think that being an athlete, you're so aware of your body and you fight so hard for some kind of stasis in your body, which Parkinson's doesn't always give you that opportunity, right? Because it robs you of sleep, it robs you of, like Davis said, he felt so trapped in his body, and this from a man who, was used to making his living off of, what his body could do. And he lost a lot with his speech and even just sort of, quick processing cognitively, in terms of doing live television work. And so, there were a lot of losses, but then there was also like, okay, well, I'm going to live a long time with this. I think that's the big thing about Parkinson's, is that reality that depending on when you're diagnosed, this is you need to forge a peace with the disease in order to live well. And I think that's probably the thing we've done arguably the best.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking about this the other day when I was vacuuming, is that there's a way that you can create a positive frame of reference in your mind to almost any activity. And I was thinking, this is pretty good physical therapy for me, working the vacuum. And not only that, there's a certain joy in completing a task successfully. And so I feel like that for us, creating those little victory moments have been ideal to us living well with Parkinson's,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I'm very grateful that he could vacuum. So, I've tasked him with certain things.
Yeah.
I cook, I love to cook, but he usually cleans up. And, when I talk to caregiver groups, that's a big focus, is like, hey, don't exclude your person from Parkinson's from helping out. That's part of what a relationship is helping each other, and just because he might do it a little more slowly, but he's gonna do it, and he's gonna do a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, just to hit on a lot of things that I think are really important. Coming to peace with the diagnosis. Language I've heard. There's a palliative care doctor, B.J. Miller, who talks about his experience as a triple amputee. And for a while, he was in rehab and he was wearing prosthetics and he was trying to get back to normal. And then he was in an art museum and saw these busts that are missing legs and heads and that are beautiful works of art. And he had this realization that I need to find wholeness right now.
Oh.
And that was when rehab ended and healing began. And it sounded like for you that I don't know if you had a singular moment like that, but it sounds like on this journey you found a path to healing and a path to, as you say, making peace with Parkinson's.
Well, and it's hard to say that you've made peace 100% of the time, because I've certainly had my moments
journey
of frustration.
Yeah.
But in general, I think that, our background as athletes have helped us, because we're able to focus on what we want to accomplish on each and every given day versus taking it out and looking too far into the future, which for sure is uncertain.
Mhm.
And so I've just stopped doing that, basically, and I focus on today much more.
You focus on, like I would say, that
Emphatically.
we both focus on what nourishes us. So whether that's, the work we do with the Davis Phinney Foundation, of course, has been just surprisingly fulfilling on so many levels, heartbreaking as well as just making us so happy, so gratified that, to be able to help people, meet them where they are and help them on some level, knowing that in the end of the day, what they have to do is learn to help themselves. And, but we like advocating for them as we have learned to advocate for ourselves. And, it's it's not a linear path. And so you have to be able to kind of roll with the ups and downs. But I think that's also part of what our elite athlete background gave us, was that resilience of, wow, I feel terrible today. And you know what, maybe I just need to rest a little bit and I'll feel better. So, I've been talking a lot lately about Olympic level resting, because I think what most people, we just had the Tokyo Olympics, and most people don't realize that the best thing athletes do is rest. They rest really well. And that's how they achieve those high levels, And so as a person with Parkinson's, rest can be challenging, if you're tremoring or if you're just uncomfortable. And that's what I've said a lot with people that don't understand what Davis goes through, because he looks great. They're like, but he looks so good. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? He's almost always on some level, like mildly uncomfortable. And I think that's the hardest thing about Parkinson's, is that level of, I would say, dis-ease, because it's not easy. And so it's finding that kind of peace with, and will help you find more ease, and that seems to be a big goal of ours too, is just to, stretch the time periods where it's a little easier than other times. And I think that's what Davis would call a victory.
Yeah.
And before I do want to hear more about the foundation, I want to ask a question that comes up a lot in clinic. I don't necessarily have a good answer for, but it's like, you talk about the ups and downs, but it's not like you're dealing with something that's stable, that Parkinson's will change the rules and it'll change the rules in a month or a year. And so how do you deal with, always, it's not like you just get to redefine yourself. It's a constant process. And how do you deal with that?
Well, for me, I've been tremendously fortunate to have had a great result from DVS. And that's allowed me to live basically now for some 14 years past my surgery with a fairly predictable level of function. And so I feel very fortunate because of that. And as well, seeing you when you were our neurologist in Denver was very helpful, because there was the DBS effects, and then there was just dealing with living with Parkinson's, which you were very expert at giving us guidance to. And so that's been helpful for me, for sure.
Well, yeah, because I think we all, as we age, we change anyway, right? And so I think that the mental aspect of how you grapple with the illness is so important, which is why your support team is so important. And building your, whether it's your spiritual life or your internal life, meditation. Davis does meditation. We do yoga together. We try to keep a calming environment, which is all humans should be doing that, not just people with Parkinson's. But we, and we don't watch the news because it's so troubling. We don't focus on negative news anyway, I should say. We read the news for sure. But I would say, we've learned to kind of carve out a much more peaceful life than we probably would have had otherwise. And we both also are, we know what we like, and we love a wonderful sunset or sunrise.
Well, as we call it, every day we're searching for our moment of awe,
yeah,
which is just that. It could be like a flower that's just bloomed, or it could be a local cat that comes up and asks for a pet.
Or yesterday we saw this beautiful stand of aspens. Most of them were already had changed color and dropped their leaves. And then we came around a turn and I said, okay, that's it. Oh my gosh. And so, it's just those little things too. And so I can't even remember what your original question was, but so much of it just comes back to like philosophy and changing. I think what we were talking about is that there's never, just the change. And when I talk to caregiver groups, I really like to advise people that, I think the hardest thing is planning. I have friends who love to plan things like so far out, and, they've got all these concrete dates on the calendar, and we resist doing that because it usually sets us up for failure. And so we're much better spontaneous than we are overly planned. And a lot of that is just how we're feeling, and especially how Davis is feeling. And so I think we're more resilient that way because we can adapt. We're adapting all the time, and we're not getting, feeling crushing defeat if we can't do something.
Who was the podcaster who used the term enforced presence?
Oh yeah, I was listening to Esther Perel talking about COVID and how hard this time has been for so many people. Esther Perel is a psychologist. I think we've talked about her before, Benzi, but I just loved her take on how some people really felt like captive animals when they were in quarantine, because of this enforced presence. They couldn't make the plans that they were used to being able to plan and carry out. We could make all the plans in the world, but we usually don't carry them out. So we were like, this is just like Parkinson's. We're in an enforced presence. And you know what, like if you look at Buddhism or any, spiritual practice, Christianity even, we're looking at, trying to be in the moment, right? To help each other. And we do really well in that, in the moment of right now.
Yeah, it has been, I don't know if you'd call it a bright side, but I guess it's been a positive lesson, of COVID. There certainly have been a number of them that, some people have focused more on joy since COVID. I think people have, as you say, come to terms more with, not just uncertainty, but just that we can't control the future, and how to, and learning to live in the present.
Well,
Yeah.
and part of that is being grateful for those few moments or things throughout the day. And so another friend of ours, Wayne Gilbert, who's our poet in residence at the Davis Phinney Foundation, came up with a sort of a way to
His wife
acknowledge-
challenged him. This is a caregiver thing. His wife challenged him to wake up in the morning and state 4 things he's grateful for. And before he goes to bed, 4 things he's grateful for. And that's really helped him. And I think that that's, there's these simple things we can do apart from, medication management and all the monitoring one has to do as one ages or as one has Parkinson's, and just focus on, wow, I'm really grateful for that. And sometimes it's the friends you have, sometimes it's just the weather or, your children, your parents, whatever it could be. It doesn't take much to find gratitude in the world. So as you can see, we that's a big part of, I think, what keeps us going.
Yeah, keeps us smiling.
Yeah.
I'd like to highlight some of that, but I also want to make sure we talk about, so when did you make a decision to start the Davis Phinney Foundation? How did that happen?
Well, that was
A mistake, really.
I don't know about that.
Well, no, but it didn't. It started because it was actually to help benefit a neuroscience institute in Cincinnati. That one of our bike camp clients from our bike touring days had a parent with Parkinson's and wanted to help have a ride and name it after Davis after he was diagnosed. About 4 or 5 years after you were diagnosed, I think. And but in order to do that, they needed to create a nonprofit, and so it had Davis's name on it. And we started there just thinking it was just going to be this one bike ride in Cincinnati with this one very motivated client as the organizer. And then and one neuroscientist or neurosurgeon who really, was instrumental, John too. And and then we were like, well, they actually created the model. The Cincinnati Neuroscience Institute created the model for the original Victory Summits, which were bringing physicians together with people with Parkinson's and the caregiving population and anybody else who wanted to learn more about Parkinson's all together in one room. And we had several hundred people at those original events that were in tandem with the bike ride. And we were like, wow, this is amazing. Like this opportunity for people like you, Dr. Kluger, to interact with people like Davis or with me in a more casual format, because we could corner you in the hallway or, ask questions while you were on stage. And that was really the basis for it. And it just started growing slowly. And we realized we had access to so little information when Davis was diagnosed in 2000. And in Denver, there were very few movement disorder specialists, much less even neurologists. And so, so we were hungry for information. And it's the same reason we actually started our bike camp business originally, was that when I stopped racing, he was still racing. When we were first started, we started because when we started bike racing, we didn't have much instruction. And so what if we help people learn how to, what if we made the learning curve, steeper? And that's really what we did with the foundation.
Well, and also
to begin with,
as part of that was as I moved around the country and met more people with Parkinson's, I kept having a similar theme conversation where people were just waiting in sort of a passive state for someone to cure the disease or find the cure.
Yeah.
And I realized that, to Connie's point, we could help them think differently and look differently at their
And have more
disease and
resources.
motivate them
Yeah.
to get up and move, because as I have often said, being passive with Parkinson's is not a good thing. You have to be more engaged
You know,
and more
Benzi, yeah,
interactive with it.
some of this also stemmed from my upbringing in a home where my mom had multiple sclerosis. She was diagnosed when I was 5. She was 30, and she had so little information, you know, and basically they told her just not to do anything, you know, and that they couldn't really help. They meaning the medical establishment at the time. And so I kind of bore witness to my mother saying there's a cure around the corner, and there was no cure around the corner. They treat MS a lot better today than they did then. But that's what we're finding with Parkinson's too, is that, you know, we applaud the efforts of the Michael J. Fox Foundation to find a cure, and the might of the money that they've raised to do that. And we hope one day that, you know, a cure is found. Of course we do, but Davis may not be around for that. I might not be around for that. So what do we have? We have today. Again, it goes back to that present. And as you know, working with palliative care, that this is a way to approach your life in, you know, looking at all facets of your life. And the person with Parkinson's really needs to do that, as does the caregiver, in order to live your best life, you know. And so there's so many facets to the disease. You know, people talk about it as a constellation of symptoms. You know, the sky is enormous. There's a lot of stars up there. And so it's easy to get lost. And then with that loss comes, you know, apathy and other things that you know, you experienced quite a bit of that in your journey early on. And whether it was med driven or just reaction to diagnosis driven, it was, you know, it takes a while. You know, there's different phases. The diagnosis phase requires a lot of adjustment. But even now, and, you know, we've said this to you, Benzi, we visited you, you know, as a clinician, probably 15 years into Davis's Parkinson's journey, with this disease, thinking that we knew quite a bit. And we left your office with a list of 10 different things we could try, you know, because you had put fresh eyes on the situation. You'd asked fresh questions and, you know, looked at them a little differently. And as Davis said, when you walked in the door for your appointment, Benzi said,
"What can I do for you?
What can I do for you?" Wow. You know, and I don't think you think that's revolutionary, Benzi, but I think for a person with Parkinson's, to have someone look them in the eye and say, "What can I do for you? How can I help your life be better?" I mean, I think that's the whole, you know, the genesis for palliative care, right? Is how can your life be better? That's, every doctor should ask that of their patients, not just people with Parkinson's. But it's not the norm,
Right.
And we can all do better. And so to come out of there with a list, and you know, you gave us a list, and I said, which one, you know, would you recommend? And I don't know if you remember this, but you were like, well, I think if you want to hit it out of the park, you gave us a baseball metaphor, try this. And, you know, that was revolutionary for us. And, you know, we probably tried to, you know, you were like, don't do all these things at once. But, you know, and I think that gives you a sense of hope too, that, wow, you know, in this journey, I can make this better by trying this or trying that, depending on the situation. And I've got, you know, a medical community and a bigger team too, that can, that's looking out for me. And I think that's really important too.
Yeah, and I've you know, also learned a lot from you know, the two of you, and I think it's come out a lot in this interview. You know, the emphasis on living well with a serious illness. You know, I think you were teaching me palliative care before I started claiming that I was a palliative care expert. But living well is one, and I still use those phrases, and also the every victory counts, and really coming at things with a positive framework.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Davis can talk a little bit about the every victory counts evolution too, because I think that was so important.
Well, and that statement actually comes from my days bike racing. where we used to go on training rides and sprint for town city limit signs. And if you won that sprint, hey, put your arms up, that counts as a victory.
Mhm.
But that
This is a guy
ethos-
that likes to win too.
well, in that ethos, it was fairly easy to roll it into a phrase for the Parkinson's community, because if you count your victories as being almost anything, then you get a lot of chances to win something instead of only looking at loss.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a lot of loss.
there is. Yeah, and it's it's important, I think, as we've worked together over the years, making sure that we're mindful of loss and grief, and that this is a shitty illness, and at the same time, there's a chance for awe every day, and there's a chance for gratitude, and it's kind of holding this paradox of
Yeah.
So as we're kind of coming to the close, part of the theme of our meeting this year is taking flight and giving birth to a new society. And I acknowledge what you're saying, that we are talking about things that are simple, but they're also radical changes in the world of medicine. And from whatever perspectives you want to hit, I wonder what advice or visions you may have for people living with a serious neurologic illness, for people caring for others with neurologic illness, and also maybe for other foundations who want to make a difference in the world.
Well, I think we first want to acknowledge and congratulate you on taking flight. I think this is important. It's important work. It's important to spread this kind of work globally. Some countries do palliative care better than others, right? And I think we're afraid of that. We're afraid of what it means, when in fact we shouldn't be. We should be embracing it, because this is who we are. And we need to, recognize who we are at every stage of our life, and whatever challenges we have. And yes, there is a lot of loss, and there's a lot of grief, and there's a lot of frustration with a disease like Parkinson's, and it can be overwhelming. But I think if you can put yourself in the driver's seat, I listened recently to a woman who talked about her experiences. It's Dr. Eager. She had been in concentration camps. She's just this wonderful, sparky 93-year-old woman. And she said, we never call people with Parkinson's. I never consider my mother with MS to be a victim. And Dr. Eager would say, if you're a victim, it takes your power away. And if you don't choose to be victimized, then you're in the driver's seat. Don't you want to be in the driver's seat? And I think that that's what we, as people grappling with serious health challenges and helping people that grapple with serious health challenges, need to realize, is that we want to keep these people, we want to keep Davis in the driver's seat. But, I'm a pretty good co-pilot too. So, and my team is extensive, and it includes people like you, Benzi, people that, have the ability to look beyond just what they see and to ask the right questions. So I don't know if that answers the questions, but I think in the end of the day, since we're talking taking flight, let's be pilots then, and really
birds.
soar.
Or beautiful birds.
Yeah. And just, just keep working toward that, and keep spreading the message, and make it be the new norm, that we ask people, what do you need today?
And
I
I
like
think
that.
if you can create a good team around you, that's so vital.
Yeah.
And I've been so fortunate to have the team captain right here, who keeps me in check and balanced as much as possible.
Yeah, we keep the humor in it too, but from a foundation standpoint, to make it grow, it's just to have the foundation is there because the need is there, so it starts with that need, recognizing, the niche that you're in, which is sizable, actually, and then letting it grow organically and not expect too much all at once, because it takes a while, and you're going to make some missteps along the way, but don't we all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for spending the morning with us. I've learned a lot, actually, a lot of food for thought, a lot of spiritual reflection. So enjoy your day. Thank you for imparting your wisdom and beauty and grace on our audience, and we will be in touch. Take care.
Thank you, Benzi.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.